and welcome to the Noob and Solo Talk Anime Podcast. This is episode number 9, Promised Neverland. So, just a brief introduction. The Promised Neverland is a Cloverworks anime adaptation of the manga of the same name. It is a 12 episode anime that covers chapter 1 through chapter 37 of the manga. It was actually produced by the same director that directed Elfenlied, which is another amazing show that we're going to cover later, probably this year. Overall, season 2 was just announced like not too long ago, and it's been delayed to the beginning of next year because of COVID. So we thought, with the manga wrapping up and everything going on, this is a good time to cover the series since we both had already previously seen it. And did you rewatch it for this?
Yes.
So and then we both rewatched it in the English dub, I believe. And with that, I'm going to jump right into the summary here. So basically, it is a show about Emma, 11-year-old orphan who lives in this orphanage here with 37 other people, and their mom is named Isabella. She pretty much, is their mom, loves them, and all this stuff. Then one night, one little girl gets adopted in quotation marks, but then it turns out she was actually killed by a demon and eaten alive. So that's where the first episode leads us down this rabbit hole of these kids trying to escape the orphanage, and that's pretty much where the season leaves us at, is them escaping. So with all of that said, what are your overall impressions, Noob, of this series thus
I
far?
I feel like it's pretty good. Surprisingly better than I originally thought it would be when I first watched it. And yeah, like this is a series that really does kind of focus on a handful of characters, and it seems like starting out that it isn't like this world-ending type of plot. It's more of them just trying to save themselves. So there isn't at least at first it isn't a super high stakes anime, and it kind of like helps gradually like like allow you to get to know the characters better rather than to be thinking like about this overarching plot and like the consequences of their actions later on as opposed to what's going on in their lives right now. And I think the
Gotcha.
setting the setting in particular is what's really interesting about this because this is an anime that entirely takes place in one single setting. Like
Yep.
the entire, well, at least so far where we're at in the anime, the first season, I guess was what it'd be right now. Um, the entire setting was just this one place, and you would think that would get dull after a while, but it is because you have such interesting characters and like their motivations and stuff. You really are fully invested even like though you don't really fully understand like the actual overall world that this story is set in. So uh overall I thought it was great.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you. I mean, this is a show wasn't really on my radar at all. I had heard of the manga in the past. I heard decent things before the anime came out, but the anime did spark my interest, and I believe when I originally watched it, I watched it an all in one setting. And actually, when I rewatched it, I watched it most of it within one setting. Like I think I watched total in two settings in the rewatching for this podcast. But overall, it's a good series. I mean, shonen series, like you said, one setting, really interesting characters, kind of just struggling to figure out how to get out of the situation that they're in and making sense of that. And I think there's kind of enough like mind games and twists to make it interesting along the way. That way, it doesn't get too boring because you constantly wonder how one character is going to outsmart the other characters, and because in this show, one of the interesting things is all the characters are kind of set up as being, well, the mother character and obviously the smarter kids. They're all set up to be kind of genius level IQ because obviously to become a mother, you have to have been like a perfect student to even get given the opportunity to get to that position. So it kind of has that whole angle of, you know, a battle of the minds rather than the battle of the bodies, which is a nice break from other shonen. I mean, obviously, when it's more of a mental battle, that's a pretty interesting take for, especially like a series like this, which I would kind of compare to Attack on Titan in some ways. Obviously, it does have some parallels there. The kids are obviously much younger here. I don't know if that's necessarily benefiting the show or not. I mean, do you have any thoughts on the ages of the kids in the show here?
It's weird because, I mean, I guess this is something that kind of like maybe applies to anime in general, but especially with this show,
Hmm.
these kids don't act their age.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're far more mature than their age would suggest.
definitely.
So I didn't. I was like, like at the start of the show, they are acting like kids, and I guess it's an act that they're pitting. I wouldn't even say it's an act that they're pitting on. They haven't awoken to the reality of their world yet, so they're mature for their age, but they're still like acting like more mature kids of their age would act.
Yeah,
But I'd say as the show like goes on and stuff, you see them like really just start to like grow. Like it's like you're seeing them like not really like growing physically, but maturing like like emotionally and like mentally to the
yeah,
point where they are like on like the same mental level as all the adults in the show, which which it's interesting because it shows how mature these kids are for their age, but it also shows that because of the world that the humans are growing up in and like their circumstances, that the adults are still kind of in that mentality of a child, and they don't really ever like kind of like move into full maturity themselves because they all feel like they're like in some way shape or form like trapped. Even the
yeah,
adults do. So it's like they have that same mental and emotional like stiflement that the kids do, and it kind of helps them like maybe all relate a little bit more. And not to mention the fact that they've all experienced this same upbringing and like have come up in the same circumstances. So the adults, while they've like they've kind of gotten like I think as like like as they've grown they've kind of like nulled themselves like numbed themselves to the circumstances around like where they live and like have just used that as maybe further motivation to just focus on their own survival rather than trying to make like emotional connections and worrying about stuff like your friends and your family and stuff. You
yeah.
see that these like like, everybody in the show feels like I'd say by halfway through the first season that everybody's on like the same mental playing field,
Yeah, and
and it's
with
all
that,
about
let's just kind of move into stories and characters. I mean, we've kind of moved past the overall impressions already, kind of. So
yeah.
with that, I mean, we could kind of just break down some of the characters and what we think of them, as well as just kind of where the story leads. Obviously, we talked already here about the maturity and the growth of the characters, and really, the course of the series doesn't cover that much time. Actually, it's only a couple months that we're really seeing this kind of transition for the characters. But specifically, the first character I really wanted to bring focus on is the character of Ray, since he's the only character that knew the secret from his birth, and he apparently, you know, never told anyone and strategically planned to like revolt once he became friends with the other Norman and Emma characters. What did you think of his character and how he was portrayed this season?
It's interesting. There's things I liked about Ray, and then there was a lot of things I didn't like about Ray. I'm gonna just maybe first go over the things I didn't like about Ray, and it's probably that he, for somebody who seems to be as mature as he is, he's relatively immature in the way he thinks about stuff. He doesn't seem to really fully appreciate how mature and how intelligent like the other kids are until much later on into the season. So
Yeah, he kind of
he
gives you
tends
a
to
little bit of a light Yagami vibe in his own arrogance, especially in the scene where he's planning to light himself on fire. I mean, it's kind of like to me, that's the climax of his character arc of him believing he's a true genius, and then the reality that his master plan really wasn't the plan that would ultimately save everyone. I think that was a good the whole like
Well, the thing
last
is,
sequence
I
is
don't think he ever really intended to save everyone. He didn't even think it was possible.
no. I mean, just to save like the people he cared about is what
Yeah.
I'm. His plan ultimately failed, and it wasn't the plan that would have worked in the first place. So, and it takes all of that to happen for him to get to that climax of him realizing that he needs to rely on other people and he can't do everything himself.
But you start to see him like and this is one thing the show does really well is having characters have a proper reaction and like a duration of time like to like an emotional stimulus. So Norman dying drastically changed Ray as a character. And you don't see it just like, oh, he's over it by the next episode. He never gets over it. And that's something we don't see in a lot of other shows. In a lot of other shows, you see like when a very important character dies, other characters tend to get over it pretty quickly, and you're left wondering like, was their death even really that important? But with Ray, like Norman's death changed his character. His character literally changed after that. Ray was far less arrogant. He was far less assuming, and he was much
I
more.
would
I
I
feel like he
would
was more.
definitely disagree. Because one he Norman knew that Ray was planning to kill himself by fire always, and once Norman's gone, Ray just continues with that plan and down that same arrogant path. So
Well,
he did not change. He just basically gave up any other option. Like but he wasn't really considering any other option anyways. That's why I was saying that is really the moment of his arc where he truly changes when Norman's plan comes into fruition and he has that conversation with the spirit version of him. That's when he truly gets acceptance. That's when his character changes. His character doesn't really change after that. He's just kind
I
of a
feel
little
like his
pissed
character
off.
did change with
No,
Norman's
no,
death.
because
Like,
I think he was just a little upset
he
that
was not the same guy after Norman died.
he definitely
I don't
was.
even
Yeah.
think he was like. I think after Norman died, he felt a lot. He seemed a lot more defeated. Like he was more
Well,
vulnerable after Norman's death
but
than he
again,
was
it wasn't
before.
because Norman died. It was because his original plan, or it was because Norman didn't go according to his plan. And that's why he was upset, not because Norman necessarily died. It's because Norman went against his ultimate master plan. And then it takes for those events to happen for him to realize that Norman's plan was actually the only plan that was going to work. And it took him going through that whole arc to realize that. Otherwise, I mean, he wasn't just directly like if Norman died a different way. I mean, I think he would have felt completely different. But the fact that Norman didn't agree to his plan, that's why he was upset because
No,
he
I
felt like
think
he
it was
did.
the fact that he realized that with all of his, because he spent 6 years working on his plan, and when he
Yeah, and
realized
then
that,
Norman
like
undermines it.
even as intelligent as he thought he was, and as like far ahead of everybody else as he thought he was always like 6 steps ahead of everybody else. But when he finally had to face the reality that all of his plans were like
But it was undone by
basically
Norman,
stopped like in their
by
like
Norman,
tracks. Hmm?
by Norman. That's what I'm saying.
Norman himself, like
Yes,
I don't
Norman
think
by
Norman was really
himself.
trying to like stop Ray's plans.
No, he did.
Norman
He
is the
did.
like Ray had this plan set in stone that Ray was kind of not willing to deviate from. Norman's plans changed as the circumstances changed. So Norman was able to better adapt than Ray was. And I felt like when Ray finally realized that like all the planning in the world didn't really matter in the end. He kind of like he had this his whole mindset on like how he viewed himself compared to other people. I think changed. Maybe his plan
No,
overall didn't
I
change,
mean,
but I didn't think his
like
way of thinking
I w-
probably did
I
drastically
would
change.
say he was no because Norman's the one. I do believe at that point his character believed if Norman followed his plan, things would have turned out according to his original plan. The only thing that changed is he ended up losing Norman, which was his main objective, is to keep Norman alive. He's devastated by that fact that the plan I do believe his character in his heart believed if Norman followed his plan, he would have lived up to the moment at the end where he lights himself on fire, because that's why he doesn't deviate from his plan, because he doesn't realize his plan would never work until after Emma had to come in and save him and show him Norman's plan was the true plan to save everybody. And that's why they also none of the kids informed Ray of what was going on, because that Ray was so confident, and he could have done something to maybe make that plan not work, because he didn't trust in everyone. He trusted only in his plan and what he wanted to do. So that's why they didn't even include him, and knowing when the other kids found out about the secret, or including because he had already was strong on that conviction that he can't save everyone, and he's going to do his plan exactly how he's going to do it, and that does not change until Norman's plan comes into fruition.
I mean, even though Ray's plan didn't change, I think Ray as a character did change. I mean, maybe you didn't see it, but I do feel like Ray's character
Well,
did change
it's
after
over the
Norman's death.
course of
It's
like one episode that we even see this change. I've read the manga as well up to this point in the season, which is chapter 37, which I highly recommend everyone to read the manga. It goes into way more detail in certain things, but just even in the anime itself, I mean, it doesn't show that much to really draw a true conclusion on whether he changed or not. He doesn't really change. Sulking and crying is not changing. That's not a character development. It's once you stop crying and then you make a decision, that's when your character changes. So I
I
I,
mean,
I
he
agree with
was
you.
like he was going through a change, but he was also like going through mourning in the
But the thing
process
is,
too. Like,
change.
Norman was like a
But
brother to him.
but
So
exactly. But you're arguing this is a change in his character. It was
this
not a.
it was. I do feel like it was a
No,
change in his character.
if when
Yeah,
you get
like
depressed in your life, when you're in a depressive state, it changes the state of your character, but it doesn't change who you are. It's after you get over that depression, after that revelation happens, that's when his character truly changes. Before
I
that, his
mean, like,
character is
yeah, his
just
character
depressed.
is going to continue constantly changing, but like that was a like an emotional turning point for him was Norman's death. Like
Yeah, no, he
I
gets depressed. That's not the same as his
no
character
no
changing.
like yeah, depression is an emotion, but like it's the beginning of a real change in him.
The change does not
I
happen
don't
until
think
that
if
moment, though.
Norman was still alive by the end of the series that Ray would be the same character by the end that he was at the beginning. But I mean, I guess we can feel free to disagree on that. You want to go on to the next character?
No, because there's one other really important thing we gotta acknowledge about Ray. What did you think of the revelation that he's Isabel's son, her true son?
It happened so fast. It just it. I mean, it was like it was kind of like a cool revelation, but the fact that it just had like you just get that revelation in like what the last like 3 minutes of the last episode. It just really I felt like they could have explored that a little bit more. Like, because it seemed like Isabella, like she didn't seem to like at first like in until like until like the last 5 minutes of the last episode, you don't really view Isabella as a humanized character. She doesn't get that like that humanization and the reveal of her backstory until like that last 5 minutes of the last episode. And I felt like if they explore it more in season two, that would be great because I think that was a great way to like set up something for season two. But in itself, the revelation happened so late in season one that it doesn't really kind of like have the impact that it would have if it had happened like maybe a few episodes
Well,
earlier.
here's the thing. I mean, we have to also remember, this show does only cover roughly the first 40 chapters of the manga. The manga is a total of 160, 170. So we're looking at this series at least being probably 4 seasons to complete the story. So this is the first part of that, of season one of a 4-part series, probably. So, I mean, I really think that will that revelation play in hand more? I haven't read too far ahead in the manga, so I'm not super informed on what that might lead to, but I mean, it definitely is interesting, and it definitely could lead to further things in the future because we still don't know anything about any of the kids' fathers either. So we by learning that we learned Ray was her son. We learned that obviously we know during the mother training, the mothers have to give birth to more kids. Is that where all the babies come from? Is the mothers, or are some babies? Are there just people that are there, or who's the father of all these kids? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of questions there, and how that process works that are still left open. That I'm sure we'll find more information out in further seasons. So But with all that said, I like I said, we can go into. I guess we'll do the other main three characters. We already talked a little bit about Norman. Um, like you said, Norman. He's the smartest character in the show. He's really the L to the Kira. I would say the Death Note comparison to Ray and Norman. There, they kind of give me that whole type of vibes because they're kind of at a wits battle with each other several times in the show, like arguing with each other of which plan's the best. And we see that dynamic the whole show. And Emma's just kind of there as a background character until the very end, like where she. Because
I'm
I would
gonna
say
disagree. I'm like when we get to Emma, I'm gonna heavily disagree with you on that. But before that, on Norman, I do feel like yeah, he did have that dynamic of like the mental battle with Ray going on back and forth throughout the entire course of the show, and you're just wondering like it kept. That's one thing that kind of kept me on the edge of my seat is you always wonder like which of their plans like what plan do they have that's counteracting each other's plan at any given moment um
yeah.
and especially this kind of like leads me into when Norman died. I actually thought that Norman was like found a way to somehow survive it and that he was still alive simply because I was like Norman's pretty smart
We don't know
and
Norman's
he's
dead.
I mean it's heavily implied that Ray was kind of like,
He
seeing Norman's ghost or something.
I'm gonna say it right here, right now. I'm not far enough in the manga because I basically read the manga up to the point of this season. I do not know definitively if Norman is alive, but I'm almost 100% sure, based on just story structure and knowing anime, Norman is definitely not dead. He cannot be dead. That wouldn't make any sense.
I think
They would
Norman probably is
they
dead, but
no, he's definitely not dead. He went into a different room. Something else is going to happen to Norman. How were we talking about the fathers of the other people? Maybe that's what Norman's going to become. If the mothers have a role that happens, maybe that's what happened to Norman. There's so many things that could happen to him, and I guarantee we're going to see him again. I almost guarantee it because
I mean,
they
you're
they would
introducing an interesting
they,
theory, so I would like to see how that plays out, and we're
I'm
definitely
almost
going to cover
confident
every season as it comes out.
I'm almost confident it's not even a theory at this point. Obviously I'll find out very soon because I'm reading the manga. But yeah, Norman's definitely alive. They would have showed him dying. They would have done that. So he's alive.
Ah, I don't know. It just seems like maybe he is alive.
He is alive.
I can't be 100% sure, but
I'm 100%
I
sure.
I feel like his like if he is alive, it kind of like his death and what it actually did may not have had. It still is gonna have a huge impact because if Norman hadn't have like so called, I mean, I'm gonna put this in air quotes because I don't know if Norman, if they other characters didn't think Norman had died, it wouldn't have they wouldn't have been able to actually
Well,
accomplish the plan
I
the way
agree
they
with
did
you
because
cuz
they needed
yeah.
that extra bit of push that the realization that their lives are going to come to an end very
Well,
soon if they don't do something.
my
They
thing
needed like
is
something big to happen for them to
well,
actually start acting and really get off their ass and do something.
what I want
So
to explain about that though, obviously the reason that Norman, if I mean he's definitely alive for sure, I'm almost 100% of that. The reason he wouldn't want to let them know is because then they would worry about trying to save him, and I'm sure he knew that. So and he might even be a position where he can't let them know. Like I said, he might come back as more of a maybe even a villain type character later on, where
that would be awesome. That would be so
he might
awesome.
have been converted, or something's definitely going to happen to Norman other than just dying. We're gonna see him again. Maybe he is converted into like a half demon, half human creature. Because you notice there's a very lack of adult males that we've seen so far. So maybe there is some weird shit that happens with demon human hybrids. Who fucking knows? The sky's the limit at this point. But that's kind of all I really had to talk about Norman. I did want to definitely talk about Emma now here because I briefly mentioned kind of her arc in the story, and you kind of cut me off and said that you disagree. I don't actually believe she was a background character. Obviously, she's heavily influencing in all of Norman's decisions. He's basically completely swayed by her, and she's supposed to be the emotional, relatable character with a heart in the show that kind of guides the two brainiacs in the right direction. So she's a very important character, and in her own right, she kind of embodies all of their characteristics. I mean, they even say that in the first episode that she has, the capability of learning what everyone else knows. So she, by the end of the series, obviously she's surpassed Norman by being able to actually implement his plan in a way. And she surpasses Ray's obviously thinking because everyone trusts her, and I think in this show it's going to be a very crucial skill, especially surviving going forward, is that she has that confidence and that ability to lead other people. And who knows where we can go from here. I'm very curious to see where her character goes. I think her character was one of the best shonen protagonists, and it's nice to see a female shonen protagonist for once. Um, just had to
It's
say
hard
that.
for me to imagine this as a shonen, but
It is a shonen.
when it because like just all the quick little tangent. When I think of shonen, I think of like overpowered main character, and like I've broken down my shonen formula in
Death Note is a
some
shonen
previous
as well.
shows. But yeah, I do think she's a strong protagonist. She's probably one of the strongest protagonists I've seen in a shonen in a while because she um she isn't I think she's a stronger character because she isn't like overpowered within the world that they're in. She she's portrayed as being like less intelligent. I mean, I guess less intelligent than Ray and Norman early on, but
She's
she
portrayed to be able to learn from them, but she doesn't
yeah.
have the base. Like Ray's considered like a tactician. Norman's like just he's really good at just on the spot thinking. Ray's more long term thinking, and then Emma's more kind of like following your gut type of thinking. So they all kind of embody different types of processing and thinking and planning in the world. I think, and that's why they were such a powerful force, and they were able to, I think, achieve what they were trying to do here.
I mean, I really do like Emma as a the main protagonist though. I think sh I didn't think I was gonna like her like by the end of episode one because in episode one she's kind of irritating, and then every other episode she just becomes infinitely more likable. So
Yeah,
she was a very refreshing character, and I am looking forward to seeing where they take her character in future seasons. I'm hoping that this gets I mean, like, I'm hoping that they don't cut this out early, like before finishing the entire before finishing adapting the entire manga. But
don't even
if
say
that
that.
if yeah, if that does happen, I'll definitely this will definitely be one anime that I actually go into the manga and finish because it's just worth what like seeing what eventually happens to her as a character. You really do start to care about her as a character overall, even though she is sort of typical in shonen protagonist in that whole like overly optimistic and like naive view of the world kind of way,
Yeah, which I mean, even at the
it's
very
a
end,
strength to her where
her
it's kind of
character
a
refused to let go of like saving everyone until someone, what was the name of the glasses chick? Uh,
Gilda.
Gilda, she gives her a reality check saying, well, if you're going to save everyone, then there's all these other farms with all these other kids on it. So, like, I get you want to save your family, but I mean, there's all these other people out here. And it took for her to say that to her before she realized that, hey, maybe you shouldn't, like, try to overreach your shonen protagonist mentality and risk the lives of actual fucking infants trying to escape and live in the fucking apocalypse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would have been an absolute
I do
fucking
think
disaster.
that I think like I think that was a very important moment for her too, is realizing that currently she can't do everything, and
But in
she has to at
typical,
some point make
I do
sacrifices.
have to point out though, in typical shonen fashion, 2 years, just like in Naruto, basically just like in One Piece, 2 to 3 years. That's all shonen protagonist needs to come back infinitely more powerful. And that's a good lesson to all of us in our real life. If you just take 2 to 3 years to hone your skills, you can come back at least 100 times more powerful and achieve all your dreams and goals.
So in 2 years, like, yeah, they're definitely going to be more adapted to the world outside, and they're also probably going to be able to like maybe connect with other adults that are on the outs I mean,
Yeah.
other humans that are on the
This show
outside too.
definitely has
So
a lot of potential for a lot of time skips. I don't know how many time skips it could potentially do, but I guarantee there's going to be a couple.
so I do like where you went with that, and it just leaves it open. This show has so much potential to be probably one of the best anime ever made, and I really hope that it ends up living up to all that potential. So far, it has.
Live action movie coming out at the end of this year in Japan as
Oh
well.
hell no, hell no.
Yeah, that's
Like
happening.
I like I'm done with live action adaptations. Like, but uh,
All right. Well, before we get too off topic, let's just get back to the characters. So, I mean, I guess we could talk about the other kids before we get to the mom and sister or whatever. So, there's obviously Don and Gilda. Those are the other older kids.
they're pretty much the only two other characters worth talking about in this season.
Yeah. Well, I like
So
Don. Don was a really cool character. I feel like I relate to Don most. He's like the only one who like truly cares. It feels like at certain moments. I mean,
no,
more so even than Emma, because he actually is like pissed off at especially Ray when he punches him in the face after he finds out about what he did, keeping it a secret, letting all those other kids die. I
well,
mean,
here's the thing too, and this is kind of like maybe bouncing back to Ray some too, but I feel it's necessary to go over this. Did Ray really have a choice? Yeah, he has he's culpable because he had knowledge of what was going on, but what could he have done about it?
no, there's definitely
Um,
not a choice. He made the best choice.
and so
But
like
like
Don to feel like he's somehow like morally more just than Ray
he
because he
does he
didn't have
doesn't
that knowledge.
no no no
If
no
Don had that knowledge,
Don does
knowing
not feel
how
that way. Don does
uh
not feel. I would disagree.
I mean,
Don
I would say Don, like at least at first, he did kind of
he
feel
has
like
a
Ray was responsible for
he
every
has a
kid that died
visual.
because he knew about it.
He has a reaction that's realistic. If you found out all your siblings were killed and one of your siblings knew about it, you would have the same exact response. But as you notice, Don immediately calms down afterwards, and he
I
like
wouldn't say immediately. He
reflects on
does
it.
punch both Ray and Norman,
Well, they deserved it.
and then no, they didn't deserve it.
They deserved at least a punch.
Nah, they didn't. Nah, they didn't.
Because they
Like
also
nah,
they continued to lie to him and the other chick. That's why they got
but
punched.
yeah, and then on top of that, Don has is also he so far established himself as being a complete idiot. He
That's
almost
why he's the best character.
no. His recklessness in going and checking
Yeah,
Isabella's room and
that
stuff
was
nearly
dumb,
cost all of them the plan that they had been working on for so long.
but it
And
wasn't his
he didn't
fault.
accomplish anything other than finding out a little bit more of the truth,
But the
which
thing is, when you're dealing with human traffickers, it's a much different situation than dealing with demons. And they already felt like they were being lied to, so they had to take it upon themselves to try to get more information. And that's
well,
not their
well,
fault.
well, I don't think it like for everybody growing up in this orphanage, human trafficking and demons is kind of like you know like there might not be a whole lot of difference between those because
There's a
it's
huge
not like they
difference.
have a whole lot of understanding of what
There's a
the
huge
outside
difference.
world is like. They own their whole world as far as they're concerned is that orphanage.
No,
Yes,
they have a
I'm not
lot of
saying yeah
books.
that it is a huge difference. Yeah, when we're speaking from our point of view, but think
No,
about kids who
from
grew up in
their
this orphanage. The only other human beings they knew are the other people in this orphanage.
you have to understand they have a lot of access to a lot of books. They know a lot about the outside world, at least how it used to be in the
They
past.
know what these demons wanted them to know about the outside world, and we don't even know if all the stuff written in those books are even true. We
Um,
don't know what's written in all those
it,
books. They have access to a lot of books, but we
it
don't know what's in them.
but it's
So
definitely true, and it's heavily implied they know a lot about the outside world. obviously they just don't directly expose to it. I mean, Ray even gets a lot of stuff from the outside world. What he learns from books, he even finds out about things like the camera, and they know about the car, and they know about a lot of things. I mean, they don't hinder their knowledge. They want them to be knowledgeable. That's what makes their brain grow. It's not just simple IQ, which is the test they're taking. These are like similar to IQ tests, but they also need growth and development. And doing that through fake information technically is possible, but when you actually fundamentally grasp like things like science and like theory and strategy, that's all stuff they learn from the book. So they have a good grip of how science works and stuff like that from their learning and experience. They definitely try to make sure that's emphasized. That's why they're so smart in the first place. So um,
Some of them are smart.
they're all
Some.
pretty smart. Like they're all considered like special. I mean, like the little kid Phil, he is a great character. We don't want to go too in depth on him, but he's like the one left there at the end to, guard the next generation while they wait or whatever. And he was foretold to have like an above, higher intelligence too. So, um,
I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with Phil. I mean, we'll probably end up
I,
having to
I
talk
my
about him
thing
too,
is
since you mentioned him.
Phil.
But hey,
Phil to me is the savior of this world. He's just waiting until he's in his prime. He's gonna be he's the John Connor of the show. Is what I see for him right now. I imagine Emma's gonna die in front of him, and then he's gonna turn Super Saiyan, and eradicate everyone else.
nah, I'm thinking Emma's never going to die.
We'll see.
She'll
We'll
live
see.
forever.
We will
But
see. All right.
I guess we can go over Gilda real quick too. I
Gilda sucks.
I agree with you on that. And
Pretty
it's not
annoying.
even that. It's not even that. I think she's going to end up just being a character I just don't like. It's just right now we don't really know anything about her. She's around, but she hasn't really contributed to much of anything yet. She's just
She
kind
was
of been like
basically
she's just been
used
kind of
as
been
a
an emotional support for Don more than anything. But
Yeah, and she was
uh,
like a red herring at one point to being the snitch. You know what I mean? So that's really all she was, and she's just kind of there. Other than that, I mean,
I think in like in the next season she's going to play a lot bigger role. But
yeah, and
right now, there's not a whole lot to say about her because there isn't just a whole lot about her to like that has you know been shown yet. So
exactly. And with all that said, I mean, the other kids, there's really not too much more to say about the other kids. They're kind of just there. I mean, obviously, each of them have their own little quirks and everything, but none of them are super, significant in the story. So with that, let's go to the sister character. What's her name?
Crown,
Crone. Yeah, yeah. What
she's
what
crazy.
what do you think about
Like,
her?
wow, like I actually she was a refreshing level of crazy.
Yeah,
She was crazy. So
yeah.
and you know what? This like before I mean before the end of the show, you she was like the first time you actually get to see how kids who grow up in these orphanages end up becoming like really messed up adults like this, and it's because
Hmm.
they've kind of awoken to this reality and they have to make a choice between dying or doing whatever they can to survive. And she embodies that. She was willing to do whatever it took to like just have a decent life because she's pretty much given up on a life outside of these farms. So
Yeah.
she's like, if I have to endure this, I might as well have the best life possible. It doesn't make her a good character at all. In fact, she's a good character in my opinion, but it doesn't make her a good person.
One thing
She
I wanted to mention real quick, since we're kind of going over that part, just one of the differences of the manga. The manga actually doesn't even have that baby doll that she's like talking to the whole time, which I found was an interesting difference because the anime specifically makes her seem more truly crazy. The way she's like flinging around that doll and some of the animations that they make her do, and she just looks like a complete psychopath. In the manga, it's less subtle. She seems more intelligent and more cunning rather than psycho. Um, just an interesting observation there. They just really wanted her to be batshit crazy in the anime for some reason. Um, but I mean, overall,
but like overall though, I
yeah,
do think like the way they like her backstory when you find it out, and like the way they humanized this character that you thought was beyond redemption it was pretty nice. I think that overall it was a great way of showing that the adults. I mean, and we're about to get into that with Isabella too, but it shows that the adults had to go through a lot to get to the point where they are, and to have such a cynical view on their existence. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
well, I mean, they really don't have any other choice. It's this is the only
it,
way that they can survive in this world. Um, Not everyone has a group of intelligent kids that they can escape with. As we learned, Isabel's farm, or Isabella's farm, is much more intelligent versus the other ones. So, I mean, there are probably exceptions in their farms that they even got to the position. They probably never had those type of relationships where something like this could even happen. Yeah. So, I mean, with that said, I don't have much to say about her. I mean, it's cool that she was able to help the main characters, and she kind of decided that, you know, let me try to help these people do something that I couldn't do, which ultimately I think is just like her human connection that we get right there at the end. And with that, let's go right into Isabella because again, she has the exact same thing happen to her. So,
Isabella is a surprisingly really good villain, because she's the villain that you I genuinely hated her throughout the course
mhm.
of the entire show, and then I kind of started to like sympathize with her in those last few minutes of the last episode when you get her backstory, and then you see that she still does have a little bit of humanity left when you see her smile after the kids escape and
Well,
stuff.
to that end, really her character, she's implied her age was 31, so she roughly had Ray when she was. Well, I mean, he's 11 and he turns 12 at the end. So she had him like as she became a mother, and that's when she started this with him being there. So really, this was her first full batch of kids. So that had to have been her first kid as a mother. So this is the first group she's really raised into full fruition, and they're the oldest kids that she's had. With that, all that implication, and with that in mind, it's kind of heavily implied that she was just trying to make them the best that they could be, and I mean, really, she was just an obstacle for them to overcome. And if they can overcome her, I mean, they could overcome anything in theory. And that's why at the end she just lets them go because I think it's that realization that they actually have a chance, which she never had, even though in her flashback, we see her question and go to the edge of the wall and kind of think about it. And from that moment, I think that's when she realized there's no way she could do it by herself. So I think her character is a very self-sacrificing character that kind of goes through a lot to even raise this generation of kids that can do that. I mean, it's kind of crazy. She's a very complex character because she also has that same view of the world that this is the best that kids can hope for is to live a happy life and then die like quickly. And I mean that to a point, I mean that's really all she could do. She doesn't have a choice and that really is the best life that most people will have lived in this world for we have no idea how long. So,
And I think overall, like Isabella and Crone's character, they raise like an interesting, I guess, philosophical thought type question, which is, I mean, something to think about. If we were in that world, would you just accept death, or would you do whatever you could to live on, even if it meant facilitating other people's death in the process? It's something that everybody thinks that they would have like one answer to, but oftentimes when you're actually in situations like that, I've seen, for instance, like people said like they would take a bullet for like a stranger if they were ever in that situation, but you're not in that situation, so you're just saying that because that's the ideal person you want to be, but when you're actually faced with that and you're having to like really face something like your own death, what would you really do in that situation? And if most people like what I think most people's actions would be drastically different than what they might say initially. and it really brings a lot more into like Isabella's character, that she may not necessarily be outright evil because she wants to survive. It just makes her human.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a
and
very
it's
complex thing to think about with her character and with
and
Crone's character.
again with her character, I think her character is even a little deeper because of I think she legitimately cares about her kids. That's why she keeps their toys. She didn't have to do that. I don't think the other mothers do that necessarily. Um, they're not like trophies or
Yeah,
anything
I
like
never
that.
even thought about that till you brought that
Um,
up. But yeah, like now that you mention it, like it is interesting that she does keep all those toys.
yeah, and I
And
she
it could be that she's kind of like, you know,
I don't think she's like
maybe
a serial killer, like collecting them
yeah.
or anything like that. And then she also does look longingly at the drawings and stuff like that. She has a connection to these kids, but this is the reality of the world that she lives in. I mean, that's how her life was. That's how everyone's life was. And I think for her taking that role to even give these kids a chance, I mean, obviously she can't just let them like escape or whatever and help them do that because that would just jeopardize everything. So I think the way everything played out was the best case situation for everyone involved because her reputation might be ruined after this, but and she could even be killed after it. I don't know what type of punishment's going to happen. I mean, that's a pretty significant deal. Uh, I'm really interested to see where her character goes from here and what's going to happen to her because of this. I think that's very interesting to think about because someone still has to watch over those kids in the first place, and I don't know if they're going to let this mother do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean that is another thing too. What is gonna happen to Isabella after this?
Yeah.
Uh, but you know what though? I could. I think honestly, most people who are in like who like grew up in a world like this, um, I can't imagine that like anything is more terrifying. Death itself is terrifying, but more terrifying than how you're gonna die and just knowing that. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I mean, and it's really one of those things. It's kind of like the idea or the way of thinking. It's like, is it better, especially if you're a person that is a leader, that you're intelligent? Is it better to die with everyone else or live on another day to possibly help other people? Which is kind of like what her character embodies is that mentality that I don't know if she directly felt that way that she had to live on. Maybe it's not even her own selfish need to live on. I mean, it might not be that simple. She might have had those thoughts in the back of her mind. Obviously, survival is what everyone starts to do, but especially when she looks out into the world, I think it's that hopeless realization that this is the only way to live. And then that's why over time she's developed these kids to be as intelligent as they are. I don't know if she was necessarily doing that all for the motives of the organization. I really do believe her character had some underlining complexity there where she had that in the back of her mind, maybe not even consciously, but at the very end she realizes, this is the best thing that probably could have happened, even if it means her death. So I think that's an awesome thing. But maybe she'll come back and be the villain again, and maybe they'll send her on like a bounty hunting thing where she has to go after them. Maybe that's the next arc. Who knows? That could be equally interesting.
I think another interesting thing too, I mean, like going outside the characters, but more into where I think the plot, like where I think the plot might eventually have to go to is, how are humans going to stand up to the demons? And how long has their world been like this? I know
Yeah.
you've read a little bit to the manga, you probably know a little bit more, but just from me, I'm just going off of this as somebody who's just watched the anime, and these are kind of things I was thinking about. Is like, because Crone brought it up. Well, actually, I think Norman or Emma asked Crone about it. Like, how did the world get like this? And she's like, "Oh, it's just always been this way." And so it makes you think, how are humans going to stand up to the demons? Outside of this farm, are there like are there like is the whole world covered in demons, or is it just this
Yeah.
area?
Well,
Like, is there more humans outside? Is
she
there?
did say there are other humans. So that's what they kind
Yeah.
of imply that they should do is they should find the humans that actually supply the goods because those are not connected to the farms. So there's obviously some type of humans out there that are doing something, but their role in this, are they kind of slaves or are they allowed to like live in towns that are kind of just, guarded by the demons? Really the demons' role in this, it's kind of interesting. I think the demons, especially here in season 1, that's the biggest mystery we're left on. Obviously, we get foreshadowing of, I believe, what was the demon called? One or something like that? He's like, I guess, the king demon. It's implied that he's the one that gets the best meals. That's why all these kids were supposed to be for him, and I guess he's the leader of the demons. Um, Interesting to see what that means or where that's gonna go or what the demon's plan is. Like, is this just like, what do the demons do on a regular day-to-day basis, you know? Do they have an economy? Like, what's going on? And I mean, obviously they're doing pretty well if they can establish farms, right? Like, I don't know what level of civilization you need to have to where you're like so not worried about any threats that you decide, hey, let's just start farming these things and eat them because they're really tasty. Because, I mean, they could just scavenge the world and just kill every human and eat every human that they want, which is maybe what they did when they first took over or something. Because it's implied the last publicized book in the show was in 2015, and the show takes place in 2045. So,
So yeah, it's what I'm thinking is that, this show is like somehow like a super sequel of like High School of the Dead. And hear me out
hmm.
on this. I
Hmm.
think, the zombies in High School of the Dead, they eventually evolve to gain
Well,
human
my
intelligence.
my theory is
And
that the scientists were working to cure the zombie infection, and it ended up evolving them into demons, kind of like a Final Fantasy type of thing, where they
yeah.
like try to mix the science and it turns into like a demon.
And zombies, they feed on brains and stuff because,
Yeah.
they need that substance. And so they gather what humans are left into farms and just breed them so that they can have an endless supply uh, of nourishment. And then over time this just becomes the norm, and they need to like designate humans to uh nurture and stimulate the mental growth of youth so that they can get more nourishment out of it, since they have limited amount of humans on a farm. And like obviously a baby's brain is not going to be as satisfying as a you know a 12-year old who's like has this more like heavily developed brain and stuff. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if maybe the main maybe one of the main characters from High School of the Dead ends up just going completely insane, or actually maybe it's like, you remember the crazy teacher from High School of the Dead.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
thinking
Listen.
one of
Listen.
his students
We're,
becomes the grandmother,
we don't need
and
to spend five
so.
minutes on
Uh,
this theory.
no, this theory
I
is fully
I
developed.
I
I
think you
feel
should
like this
go.
theory is going to be accepted on Reddit.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You can go to the Reddit page and you can post this theory in the forum for the show if you want. That's definitely totally fine to do. But yeah, I really don't have much else to say. The story is really good, so I think we should just cut over to best moments and aspects, touch on that a little bit. Um, so my best moment and best aspect of the show. So first off, my best just overall moment, I would have to say that's a very tough one. What would be? I guess probably just at the end there, the whole ending sequence, just the true, revelation and climax of it all, of the plan coming to fruition, and the reveal that he didn't actually light himself on fire. Ray didn't light himself on fire, and then the mom got tricked. I think that was my favorite moment because it's that that final climax where it's like they actually got her, you know, and that's what we've been waiting for all season is for them to outsmart her. What about you?
I'm gonna say the same thing. That part at the end where you see Emma look at Isabella and she just says bye mom and she just takes off
Yeah,
and
that
they
was awesome.
yeah that was probably like it was the most it was the conclusion you desperately wanted by the end of this season because this was a very um I don't know, and like a very like I felt like they were going through a lot of stress over the last few months, and I was going through a lot of stress with them. I was like, are they ever going to beat this woman? Because it seems like that you think for a while that they're outsmarting Isabella, and then you realize that Isabella like saw through their plan all along. And you're like, well, they're never going to stop her. This is just never going to end. And
Yep.
getting that final bit of gratification when they finally like win, it was so fulfilling. It was it made the entire season just kind of like, like over worth. It was a really great season overall, but it was just absolutely that moment of like fulfillment just
Yeah, just
made it really
when
worth
all
the
the
whole
plans
watch through.
work out. I mean, these type of anime where it's all about like strategy and stuff like that. To finally see the true strategy to that they've been building up all season play out. I mean, you really can't beat that as far as a moment. I mean, there's a lot of other smaller like good moments of character moments or other individual things, but really that end is kind of like setting us up for the next part of the series. So I think that's like really good. And just overall, just other aspects of the show I enjoyed. Um, there's not too much there. I mean, the animation I think was pretty, average. I don't think it was anything super spectacular. Obviously, this isn't an too action heavy show right now, at least. Not until they start, obliterating these demons. Hopefully, that's next season. We're taking the fight to the demons. You know what I mean? and
Yeah.
then, yeah,
I don't think they're gonna be taking the fight to the demons
there
right
was
away. I
some
think they're gonna be like in a recruiting mode more than anything.
Yeah, and there was some interesting like music cues in the show. I hated the intro theme though. It was fucking awful. Like it was really annoying. Probably the worst intro theme. One of the worst ones we covered so far. I really didn't like it.
The music for me in the show
I like kind of like
didn't really stand
well,
out, but
some of
it
the
wasn't
music,
like it wasn't like overly irritating either. It was
but
like
this
I think it
intro
was just
music,
right for the setting and stuff.
the intro music is what I'm talking about. Just the
Uh,
opening
I
theme.
don't even remember the intro.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
terrible. But there's good moments of the music, especially like in Revelations and stuff like that. There's like that ominous epic music that kind of plays sometimes. That was really enjoyable, that music. But and then obviously there's the little humming thing that the mom does that Ray did and Ray can remember everything when he was a baby for some reason and all that. So, which is kind of bullshit if you ask me,
nah, nah. Like
but I'll
yeah,
take it.
so I think yeah, the music for me it didn't really stand out, but it wasn't really like in my opinion something that held the show back either. It was kind of like I
Yeah.
think just right for the tone of the show.
Well,
I
but
think the
overall, I
animation
mean,
was pretty good
yeah, pretty
overall
basic
too.
on those aspects. Really, the show is all about the story, though, and the characters, and that's the strong suit of the story here. If you don't like the story, there's nothing else here that's gonna keep you like involved in the show. Like you have to care what's going on. I think that's the same to say for all anime like this. You have to care about this type of story. If you want just pure action or you just want all this other stuff, you're not gonna enjoy it too much. But with that said, I guess we can just jump into the final thoughts here. I mean, really, this might be a shorter show than we've done in the past, just simply because you know we're only season one of a we're like an incomplete story here. We're not covering the full story. So, is this the first series that we're doing besides My Hero that we didn't cover the full story? Besides,
Um,
um, yeah,
we well, yeah, I mean, My Hero's ongoing. This show is also ongoing, so
yeah,
we're going to be covering like season by season of this show as it comes out.
yeah,
So, yeah, it's I think for like well for us start to I mean the show there wasn't as much to talk about because the show was really setting up a bigger story rather than telling
yeah. Well,
self-contained story
this
in its
is
own
part
right.
one
So
of the story. I figure
yeah,
this is basically set up. This is introducing all the characters. This is showing the struggle they had to do, and then I feel like after this, we're pretty much we're at the top of the first hill, and we're gonna continue going up from here, hopefully. And that's where I think my final thoughts leave on what we've watched here with season one. It's definitely very interesting show. It's one of the only shows that I actually watched in the past that I've been anticipating a season two of. I don't usually watch many shows besides, obviously, like My Hero is probably the only continuing show that I really keep up with. I don't really watch many other shonen or long running series, so this show is one of the ones that I think probably was one of the best shows that came out. I think it came out what, last year or 2018? I forgot what year, but it was probably one of the best animes that came out that year for sure to me. And just rewatching it here and actually giving the manga a full read now, I think it's a greater time than ever to do it. And obviously, we have season two coming out the beginning of next year, and I really overall look forward to everything here. So
and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with this great setup that they have. And I want to see like more of these other characters, seeing how Emma changes over the course of the whole show as it's ongoing, because she might end up becoming the greatest shonen protagonist ever to grace anime.
it's
Um,
possible.
the only time will tell on that. So yeah,
Yeah.
my overall thoughts is the show was great.
Great. And with that, we can go ahead and just do the My Anime list, the good old review of the show based on their listing, just to have our score out there. So with that in mind, what is your heart saying here?
Let's see. Um, Honestly, I'd probably give it a 10.
You're thinking 10.
I can't find a single thing with this season that I disliked. I have small little nitpicks, but that's all they are, is like little nitpicks. And
Hmm.
overall, like by the time you finish one episode, you're already just starting the next episode up and just can't wait to see what happens
Yeah.
next. This for me was a 10.
I was thinking probably a 9. Maybe the first time I watched it, maybe an 8 or a 9. I don't watch many shows in one setting, and this is one of the shows that when I first watched it, I watched it in one setting. So obviously, there's a lot there with that, and probably I probably would give it a 9, but because of my anticipation and because of the setup and just rewatching it and how it actually, I think it became better the second rewatch. And now just with everything and the thoughts of the future of the show and really thinking about it and talking about it. I could say I could see it being a solid 10. I mean, we're really just reviewing the first season here. Obviously we don't know the quality of the show overall, and maybe once the series is over, we could go back and do like a overall rating kind of outside of that. But I think for season one, it really couldn't have made me want to watch the next season even more, which I think is important for a season of a show, right? Like
Yeah.
to be a 10 out of 10 of a show that has multiple seasons, you want the season to, leave people really wanting to know what happens next. And I think this show does, like you said, pretty much a flawless job doing that. There's nothing here that which we can compare it to No Guns Life, which technically was our first podcast, and that was a one that had a season two, which I think's out right now. But guess what? No one gives a shit. And
I certainly won't be
that
watching
show,
that.
the reason
Oh
we gave
man.
that show a 4 is
It's
because
because like we would have felt bad for the fandom
I
if we had given it a lower score.
I feel like it is the exact
Looking back on that
opposite.
show, I feel like it could have gotten a lower score.
Yeah, I feel like it's the exact opposite of this. While that show made me not give a flying fuck at the end of episode 12 if anything else continued after, this show I
Yeah.
just really want to know what's going to happen next, to the point where I'm reading the manga right now. So yeah, so I think 10 out of 10, I think we'll give that for season 1 of The Promised Neverland. Do we have next week's episode already pulled up? What are we doing next week here?
Next week we are doing MM.
MM. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Next week we're gonna be doing MM. What is MM about again?
Um, I actually can't think of the premise off the
I
top of my
mean,
head, but
if anyone
uh,
listened this far, um, I don't know. I don't know anything about MM. It's probably a harem knowing this guy
no,
over
no,
here.
it's not harem.
Um,
It's not harem.
so
Not
I
harem.
I doubt none of the listeners are gonna tune in from this episode to that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, if anyone's still listening here, check out MM. Watch it if you haven't. I guess if you get to episode 3, definitely come back and let us know why you hated it. And you don't have to listen to the podcast. You can just tell us why did you make me watch the first episode of that, because that's probably how I'll end up feeling. But we'll see next time. Any other things you want to say?
No, no. I would definitely say just really excited about season 2 of Promise Neverland whenever that comes out.
Yeah, well, so we'll be back with season 2 of Promised Neverland, and if you want, read the manga. Start with chapter 38, and I think that's where we'll call it.
All right. Say it.